What's going on, guys? Welcome to the David F. Haas podcast. Today's podcast is 8 tips to end anxiety. 8's not really the greatest number. Wanted to make it 7, but I couldn't let go of the 8th. So it's 8 tips to end anxiety. Been a few weeks. I've been busy opening up my new retreat center out in Harrow, Ontario. And so I've been slacking on the podcast, but we're back at it, back in the studio here. And what I've been picking up on, what me and the team have been feeling is there's just been a lot of anxiety about the current state of the world. COVID, Delta variant, lockdowns, vaccine passports. It's just kind of like never ending. With all of this, there's a great divide in the world. All of this is creating more anxiety. The government has released some stats that actually suicide rate has gone down during COVID and stuff, but it's just maybe short term, but the long term effects of what's happening here is really affecting all kinds of people. And I have a lot of people reaching out to me saying, hey, I can't get over this anxiety. It's debilitating. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to work. I can't even be in public. If anxiety is left undealt with, it can become this literally debilitating survival pattern that will eventually make you not leave your house because that's the only place that you feel safe. So I thought it would be important today to go through these 8 tips that are going to help you come out of anxiety. Now, these tips aren't coping mechanisms. The last thing I ever want to do is create a coping mechanism for any type of feeling. The goal of letting go, and the reason I've created the Letting Go School, is to help people learn how to feel their emotions fully so that they can become free of them, and then they never need any coping mechanisms. So these tips are not going to be add-ons. There's nothing that I'm going to give you that you need to add here that is going to help you end anxiety. I'm going to give you tips to let go of whatever it is that you've bought into that is creating all of this anxiety in your life. So if you're struggling with anxiety in any shape or form, this is probably the podcast for you. So let's start with the first step that I would tell everybody when they're struggling with anxiety, is that all anxiety is a projection into the future. Okay, so anytime we become anxious, and anxious comes from overthinking. So overthinking is just a pattern that we've created to try and protect ourselves from feeling some sort of pain of a particular outcome. So somewhere along the lines, we failed a test, and now we become anxious and overthink about the future test in order to try and avoid the fear or the pain of failure, right? So this is what the ego has created to try and protect you, but like all survival patterns, it ends up keeping you more stuck. Eventually, the anxiety becomes so debilitating that you can't even open your textbook because it's just too overwhelming. So if we stop projecting to the future and we start to look at, and I love this analogy, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. So anytime you look at the elephant, you ensue anxiety. It's like it is just too big. If you're standing beside an elephant and you had to eat it, gun to your head, you would have this meltdown. But if you just can recognize that it's just one bite at a time. And what is one bite at a time? One bite at a time is remaining in the present moment. So just recognizing that the anxiety is only coming from a projection into the future. So with that awareness alone, that should be enough to begin pulling you out of it. And I know that people with anxiety are going to say, oh, I'm aware that I'm anxious and I'm aware that this is happening, but it's just really looking at what your mind is telling you on a regular basis. Okay. So that would be step 1, is to observe, right? We want to get into this mode where we're observing our thoughts. So your mind will tell you the same thing over and over again, probably 1,000 or 10,000 times a day. So if you have anxiety about, if let's say you don't have the vaccine and your work is going to, pressure you to get the vaccine or you're going to get fired. So if you have anxiety about getting the vaccine or getting fired because you don't get the vaccine, your mind is going to tell you a million different scenarios about that over and over and over again. And eventually you're going to feel overwhelmed and you're going to have what we have labeled anxiety. Okay. And then you're going to go to the doctor and they're going to try and find a way to help you cope with that anxiety. But putting a Band-Aid on it with medication is not going to help you resolve this, because you haven't dealt with the underlying issue. And at the underlying issue, the underlying core of this thing is fear of, let's say, poverty, because you're going to lose your job, right? So if you could learn how to become free of your fear of poverty, then the anxiety would go away. If you're not scared that if you lose your job and then you could just go get another one, if you really truly knew that and felt that at your core, there would be no anxiety about losing your job, if that makes sense. So if we learn how to let go of the underlying feeling, we can learn how to let go of the anxiety. All right. So step one is just to understand what it is we're telling ourselves on a regular basis. What do we have anxiety about? And people say, I don't know. Well, it's because you never looked, right? So you need to really begin observing your thoughts. How do you observe your thoughts? I've done this experiment or this exercise a lot on this podcast, but if you're listening right now, don't do this if you're driving, but you close your eyes and you make your inner voice say hello. And now I want you to make your inner voice say hello 3 times. And now I want you to make your inner voice scream hello. And now you can open your eyes. So what was it that allowed you to observe your mind talking to you, saying hello and hello, hello, hello? What was it? It was your level of consciousness or your awareness. So the awareness of the mind is the tool that we want to use to begin observing what it is we're telling ourselves on a daily basis. When we start to observe, we'll start to realize that there is a pattern or a theme to our endless thoughts. And that pattern might be around your relationship. It might be around your job. It might be around losing your job. It might be around not having enough, whatever it is. We just want to kind of like put this into a compartment. Then you can start to say, oh, like pretty much all of my thoughts are about losing my job. So now we can then use the and then what scenario to say, well, what would happen if I lost my job? And then what? Well, and then I wouldn't be able to pay my bills. And then what would happen? And then I would lose my house. And then what would happen? Right? And just keep going down this road. And then at the end of the road, you're gonna confront the ultimate fear, which is the fear of death. All anxiety, all fear is connected to the fear of death. And learning how to overcome the fear of death is about disconnecting from this belief that you are your mind and you are your body, and connecting to your true self, which is this consciousness or this awareness that we're talking about here in step 1. Okay, so step 1 is just start watching. So where do I watch my thoughts? The shower is a great place. No distractions. You don't have a cell phone. You don't have a radio. You don't have anything. So just listen. We're not trying to slow the thoughts down. We're just listening. I also get in my car. I turn the radio off for 5 minutes every now and then. You can also observe them in meditation. You could observe them on a walk. Is another great place. You want to find a place where you're free from distractions of television, social media, cell phones, phone calls, friends, family, these types of things. Okay, so step 2 is we need to recognize, and I kind of already talked about this, what emotion is connected to all of these thoughts. So I get a lot of pushback on this, but I follow David Hawkins, Dr. David Hawkins' teachings, and basically he teaches that all thoughts are connected to emotions. Right? And some people say the thought comes before the emotion comes before the thought, but I don't really care, right? Which is which. All I know that is if I learn how to become free of an emotion, I am going to wipe away all of the thoughts that are associated with that emotion. I just made a video about this, about how it's like the emotion is like the file in the computer, and the thoughts are the things that we keep dumping into that file. So eventually that file just becomes so overburdened that the system shuts down, right? So if we learn how to identify what that file is, what the emotion is, and we don't even really need to put a label on it. It doesn't need to be labeled fear or shame or guilt. It can just be the feeling, right? It's like, how is it that you're feeling? I feel like shit. I feel terrible. Then just feel terrible. Allow yourself to feel terrible. And once you learn how to connect fully to that emotion then and become free of it, all of the thoughts associated with it go away. All right. So my example, I've given this example a million times, so I apologize if you're hearing it, but it is through repetition that we learn. So my desire for money was my biggest block to actually achieving money. So before I became aware of why I desired money so much, my life was consumed by desire-driven thoughts. How could I get more? How could I make more money? Everything I did was about making more money, right? And so underneath that desire was the shame and the embarrassment that I felt as a kid. I'm not going to go into the whole story here because this podcast will be way too long. So once I learned how to feel that shame, then I dropped the desire, then I dropped all of the thoughts that are associated with that. once I was free of the shame of being a kid that didn't have what other kids had, then I no longer needed the desire, and I no longer needed all the thoughts associated with it. So my desire for money went from a 10 to a 1 in like a 5-minute meditation. So this is why I always tell people you could be 5 minutes away from like a major breakthrough in your life if you learn to connect to the root cause on the emotion. Okay, so step 2, identify what emotion is connected to all of these thoughts. Don't care whether you think it's the thoughts or the emotion that came first. Step 3 is awareness. So we've already kind of created some awareness around what we're thinking and what emotion, but the thing that I love so much about awareness is that just by looking, it changes. All right. So this is why I tell people I can get people relief from anxiety usually in just one session, because I get them to look for the first time, like really look. Most of us aren't really ever observing and really analyzing what's happening in our minds. We don't even know how to listen. So once we finally start to look, with that awareness alone, it's like kind of like once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So once you see that all your thoughts are being driven by the fear of losing your job, then you can't unsee it. So now every time a thought pops up about, oh shit, what happens if I lose my job? You go, oh, that's connected to the fear. So the awareness changes it, which will immediately begin to reduce your anxiety. So awareness is key. Awareness will begin to change things right away. And this is called the observer effect. It's very scientific based because everyone loves science these days, right? So it's like very scientific based. David Bohm created this thing. They're shooting molecules through some sort of screen, and they recognize that every time they observe the molecules, their pattern changed. So this is the exact same process that's happening to us. When we learn to observe whatever it is that we're holding in mind, we change it just by that awareness alone. Okay. A fourth thing that you can do is you can get into some sort of spiritual group. And I guess this would be an add-on here, right? But I don't really consider it an add-on because a good spiritual group will teach you how to let go. But, you could join my Letting Go school. You could join the free Letting Go prep school, which is on my Facebook group. But you could also join AA, even if you're not addicted. You could join church groups. You could join all these things. Most of them are designed to help you become aware of the programs that you've bought into and teaching you how to become free of them for good so you can connect to your true self, right? And that's exactly what I do in the Letting Go school. So the thing that is great about groups is that we benefit from the collective consciousness of the group. So you can read all you want about how to get rid of anxiety, but until you are sitting in a group where someone says, this is how I did it, then you go, oh, I can relate to that. You also realize in groups that you're not alone. We tend to think that our problems are like the center of the universe, but then all of a sudden you start sitting in these groups and you start realizing that everyone else is suffering from the exact same thing that you're suffering from. And that, collective suffering, or realizing that we're not alone, that's a better term, it begins to help us pull ourselves out of it, because we don't have the shame and the guilt of having this anxiety that is crushing us. Make sense? So find a consciousness raising group. You can message me about the Letting Go school. Also, the fifth is connecting to the present moment. Okay, so all anxiety is a projection to the future. All our thoughts are based in two areas. They're future driven or they're past driven. So all anxiety, fear, and stress lives in the future. All guilt and regret lives in the past. This is our ego. This is our ego's way of keeping us safe, of protecting us. The ego's primary function is to keep us safe. The ego is just the mind unobserved. Okay, so if we begin to observe the mind and we want to learn how to begin to stay present, the ego is going to fight the present moment with everything that it's got, meaning it's not going to shut up, because in the present moment the ego cannot exist. So this is where, when we really truly learn how to connect to the present moment, we really truly learn how to get below the noise of our thoughts of past and future. This is when the truth can be revealed to us. This is the place where we can get the answer to any question. If you have anxiety, if you can connect to the present moment, say, why do I have anxiety? That's where the answer will be revealed to you. So through the present moment, the unknown is revealed. So whatever it is you're struggling with, if you can learn how to separate yourself from the thoughts. And I do this usually in meditation, but you can pretty much do it at any time, is just by learning how to be present and recognizing when you're not being present, right? So a good example of not being present is when someone's talking, you're just waiting for your turn to talk, right? So you're not just actively listening and being present and being there for that person. So if you learn to remain present, the more present you are, the less anxiety you're going to have, because in the present moment, everything is perfect. It's only when we project to the future that we begin to create this anxiety. Meditation, I think, is, if you're suffering from anxiety and you're not doing meditation, I think that you're fighting an uphill battle, essentially. And it doesn't have to be like these big, giant, long meditations. You hear people meditating for an hour. Like, if you can find 1 minute of connecting to the present moment through meditation, it probably will have more of an effect for you than taking all kinds of anti-anxiety meds. And I'm not against medication. There probably is a place where you're so overburdened that you may need medication. But I've found that most people using these steps, just by creating awareness alone, can usually pull themselves out of it. But sometimes feelings, emotions, and thoughts become too much, and we can choose to consciously escape them, right? The problem is most of us are subconsciously escaping all of our problems, right? Through drugs, alcohol, excessive social media, excessive expression to friends. And then sometimes we're using actual medications as well, right? So if something becomes too much, the anxiety becomes too much, you can consciously choose to escape. But the important thing here is that you're consciously doing it, and you're recognizing that you're going to have to go back and deal with what the anxiety was all about in the first place. So if something becomes too much, you can consciously escape. One way to consciously escape is by meditating, right? You can calm the thoughts, slow the thoughts. And I've sat in 15-minute meditations or 20-minute meditations where I only experienced like maybe 30 seconds of the present moment, where my mind is not chitter-chattering the whole entire time. But that 30 seconds was like pure bliss. And that was enough to like set me up for the day, right? So don't be so hard on yourself, and just stay consistent with meditation, and you're going to get results. I guess I talked about this one already, but we shouldn't be seeking to cope at any time, right? We don't want to try and find coping mechanisms, right? The only time I would think that coping mechanisms are good is if, like I said recently, is if it's just so overwhelming, then maybe you can use a coping mechanism. But what you really want to do is get to the core of what is going on and let it go. So we could change this don't cope and maybe 7/let go, right? We really want to tune into the emotion, and we want to let it go. So how do you let it go? The way we let go of emotions is we stop resisting them. We allow ourselves to feel them fully, right? We connect to them. We ask ourselves, how does this feel in the body, right? Oh, like it's pit in the stomach, tightness in the chest, neck and back or sore shoulders. Anger, I feel anger like rage through the body. It's like almost like iron pouring through my veins, hot iron pouring through my veins is the way I like to describe it. It's like the feeling. And you can rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, and then you can allow yourself to sit there. Now, we're not venting it. We're not judging it. We're not condemning it. We're just staying with the energy of the emotion. And if you stay with the energy of the emotion long enough, it's gonna pass, right? So it's kind of like looking at a fire. If you just sit there and stare at a fire and you don't throw any logs on it, eventually the fire is going to burn out. But if you continue to throw logs on the fire, it's going to burn forever. And this is what most of us have been doing our entire life. And those logs are the resistance to feeling the emotion. Okay? So what we want to do in letting go is to stop putting logs, stop resisting, and let the energy of that emotion burn out. Okay? And then the eighth and final step is ask for help, right? It's like, if you have anxiety that is so bad that you can't go to work, you're not calling your friends, you're becoming recluse, whatever that may be, whatever it looks like for you, however anxiety is affecting your life, you need to be getting help in some way, shape, or form, from friends, from family, from a coach, from a therapist. But the last person that you need to be getting help from is from the higher power of your understanding, right? And whether you fully believe in a higher power or not, you can kind of like fake it till you make it in some ways, right? Basically believing, having faith that you will get through this, recognizing that no matter what, you're going to be okay. And a lot of times in anxiety, we believe that we're not going to be okay, right? Like, this is the belief. And at the belief of not being okay is that we believe at the core of this thing is we believe we're going to die, essentially, right? It's like, we can't handle this. We're going to die, right? So then when you finally learn to connect to a higher power and you realize that the higher power is constantly pushing you towards the best version of yourself, then you recognize that even in death, you will be okay, right? So I know this is like a tough concept to grasp, and it's probably like people that are in anxiety are probably going like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But what do you have to lose, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at here. It's like, what do you have to lose by sitting quietly and saying to, for me, God, universe, infinite intelligence, source power, like whatever you want to call it, what do you have to lose by saying, help me? I can't solve this on my own. I need help. Bring the help into my life. Have me get introduced to the people that I need to get introduced to. I mean, you're listening to this podcast right now, right? It's like you just created an introduction with me who's had, a 99% success rate on helping people become free of anxiety, right? So it's like, ask for the help and the help will begin to come. But in order to receive the help, you have to remove the blinders, right? And right now the blinders are the projection into the future, the looking at the elephant and becoming overwhelmed, right? So if you can just stop looking at the elephant for 1 second, the blinders will be removed and you see what's right in front of you in the present moment. And maybe all of a sudden now in the present moment, you realize, holy shit, there's been help all around me this whole entire time. I've just been too busy looking at the elephant that I've been unable to see it. So those are my 8 tips. I hope they're helpful. I know anxiety is a hot topic, somewhat of a controversial topic in some ways. People are scared to go there, but I'm not scared to go there because I believe I can help anybody become free of anxiety in the worst case. So, and there's it's not just me. There's all kinds of people that can do it as well. And you can do it on your own too. But with a good mentor, you can get to, where you want to go a lot faster because you benefit from their knowledge, their collective consciousness. And sometimes just by being around somebody that has already achieved what it is that you want to achieve, you just get it by osmosis. Like, this is like the thing, like, you are the average of the 5 people you hang around with most. So instead of hanging around with people that promote your anxiety or trying to make you feel better, you want to be around people that help you get to the root and the core and like allow you to feel fully so that you can become free forever. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and we will see you again next Wednesday.